So today I'm going to share my go-to straight out of the camera Ricoh GR3 recipe, and you can obviously use this on the IIIX as well. And I feel like it's been a very long time since I shared my recipe, since my last recipe video. I believe that's almost 2 years ago. So yeah, it's definitely been a minute. And as a matter of fact, a lot I wouldn't say a lot has changed, but especially the color one at least. First, let's go through some of the settings that I use, like that I have saved on the Ricoh, that I pretty much my go-to settings. The very first one, the user one here, that's my go-to all the time whenever I just need to do street photography. Right out of the bat, I have it at 1/200th of a second, and that ensures that whenever I have the camera on and the shutter speed is fast enough, since this is 28. And as a rule of thumb, you want to double that number. So you want to at least have 1/56 of a second. And this will make sure that your image is sharp pretty much whenever you are using a 28mm. So obviously if you're using the IIIX, that's like around 40mm full frame equiv. That means you want to have a shutter speed of 1/80th of a second. And there's really no right settings or wrong settings here, as long as you are capturing the photos that you want. If you want short photos, then yeah, you definitely want to go higher on the shutter speed and at least double the focal length. And then for aperture, I have a 7.1. If I want to, I can dial it back to have more light, like 6.3, 5.6. And as for ISO, I have this at 400 actually, instead of 200, because I find 400 to be more versatile if I'm like outdoor or indoor. And if I really need to, like if I'm shooting outdoor, I can just switch to 200 right away. It's not that, like there's a button right on the side here on the dial pad, so it's pretty easy to switch to 200 if I need to. So that's my go-to for user one. And then for user two, that's actually my black and white recipe. Every camera setting is exactly the same to user two. The only differences to user two is from color to black and white, which I'll share the recipe with you guys in a minute here. And as for user 3, I have this in color as well, but the biggest difference is the camera setting. I have this at 0.5 second at f13, or I think 11 should do, and the ISO at 200. And this is mostly whenever I like to shoot like still object, and at the same time I want everything behind it or around it to like have this blur to it. Again, this is like my personal preference. You can have it or you don't have to have this exact same setting. And I just have this at user 3 because I have an extra one. And if I want to try out different settings or different recipes, I'll go to just menu, and then that's where I can just dial everything in, and change on the go whenever I need to. The weather is actually quite nice today. Let's go somewhere nice. Right after when the negative film came out, I started using the negative film like pretty much all the time. Most of the photos I take, and the straight out of the camera especially, I use negative film instead of positive film. Not to say that positive film is bad or anything, it's just I feel like negative film looks better in my opinion, and obviously this really depends on how you like the colors. But for me, I feel like the negative film really looks amazing on the Ricoh GR3 and the IIIX. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first you want to go to image control, and that's where you can set up your recipe. I go all the way down to the first wrench, and then press F1 function button. The very first one, we use negative film. And the second setting is saturation. I actually have this on +3. I like my photos to be a bit saturated, well, more vibrant in a way, but there's no vibrant here, so I use saturation to boost that color. And the second one is hue. I have this at -2. And then now we're going to high low key adjustment. I have this at -1. All the way to contrast. I actually had this like at 0 for the longest time, and I just wasn't really feeling it, so I had this boost up to 3 now for contrast. And then we have the contrast highlight. I have this at -2. All the way down to contrast shadow, this is stays 0. And then as for sharpness, 0 as well. All the way to shading, this is also 0. And then clarity, this is 0. I like to do this afterwards if I need to, but then not like within the camera. This might be just a habit because I used to use the Fujifilm recipe, and whenever you add clarity, it slows down the camera by a whole lot. However, it doesn't slow down the Ricoh at all, so feel free to use clarity. You can add to it or decrease it however you want. It's not going to slow down the camera at all. And that's pretty much it in the setting. Now I have this saved on the very first wrench. And the second one is actually black and white, which we'll get into in just a bit here. So for the highlight correction, I have it set to auto, and the shadow correction, I have set it to medium. As for high ISO noise reduction, I have this set to off. This is also another thing I want to add later in post if I need to, instead of using the in-camera like built-in function to do that. But honestly, I don't really shoot at a high ISO with the Ricoh. I feel like the highest I have gone to is 6400, and that's about it. Obviously, there are noise to it and there's grain, but it's like natural out of the camera, so I actually don't mind that. I'd rather keep those noise inside the photo and kind of shows like how real it is, and also adds a bit of character, if you know what I mean. Now for the soul of the recipe, as you probably know, is the white balance. In my opinion, this is actually what makes the straight out of the camera recipe pop. And with the new update, you can actually save like 3 white balance inside the Ricoh, which is fantastic, because this way we can actually just come in here and just switch to whatever white balance we want. Essentially, it's kind of like switching to a different recipe that we saved inside the camera. So I have this one saved the first one because this is what I use all the time. So over here at the white balance, I have G2 and A9. This gives it a bit of a shade of green, at the same time kind of warm to the photo. And now as for my black and white recipe, I actually never changed anything to this. I don't shoot black and white that often anymore, which I really should. But whenever I do, I still use this recipe a lot because this is it just looks amazing. And so let me just go ahead and show you guys what this is. So I have everything in black and white, obviously. And then as for high-low key adjustment, I have this at 0. Contrast, I have +2. And now we have the contrast highlight, that's where I have +4. And then contrast shadow, that's where I have -4. And then now we have sharpness, I have this at +2. Now at toning, I have this at 0, nothing's changed here. Filter effect, I also don't have anything here. And then shading, I have this -2. It's kind of like a little vignetting that I add to the photo, the black and white photo, if you will. At clarity, I have this at +2. And for the grain effect, I have 0 added to the straight out of the camera JPEG photo. I feel like I'm always kind of iffy about adding grains to the photo right out of the camera. Like if anything, I'll add it later on. But a lot of people like the Ricoh grain. So let me know if you like that in your photo. If you have any recipe that you love with the Ricoh, feel free to share down below, and I would love to give it a try and see what that looks like, because there are so many opportunities and different variations out of this. So that is exactly what I use right now for the straight out of the camera JPEG for the Ricoh. And it seems like the sun's about to set. I'm gonna go take some photos. See you guys in the next one.